Welcome to the Writer at Work podcast. Ms. Catherine M.H. and Kit Boyer are your co-hosts. They will be bringing you updates on their journey to becoming full-time authors, as well as writing advice, book reviews, and information to help you on your road to authordom. Join these authors as they work on their writing careers.
The Writer at Work podcast. I'm Miss Catherine M.H., and with me, as always, is Kit Boyer, and today we're doing the evil talk. I'm just kidding. But we're talking about outlines today, and this is going to be a craft episode. So because almost everybody in the writing community knows I am a pantser, I will hand the mic over to you to start off with.
Yes, so I am a plantser, which means that I both plan things and write by the seat of my pants. So I really like to create organization that I don't end up using later on. So probably similar to Cate in some ways, I would bet. But I am a big Scrivener user. I use it exclusively for writing, unless I'm writing poems, in which case sometimes I'll just drop it right into a Google Doc, or I'll throw it onto I'll throw it into my typewriter, just like a regular sheet of paper. But I really love Scrivener. So basically any outlining I do is either going to be in Scrivener, something I can sync with Scrivener, or it'll be on paper. I really sometimes, when I'm organizing my thoughts, need to put it on physical paper, like sticky notes, and stick it on a board. When I made my Arborist of Asgard timeline, what I did with that was I went on Aeon Timeline, which is a piece of software that is really excellent, and it syncs with Scrivener in, every save, so it's really, really good. But what I did with it was I created the timeline on Aeon Timeline, and then I printed it off so that I could see it all in one place instead of having to scroll. And then I took sticky notes of what I wanted each main plot point to be, and I stuck them on the timeline, on the physical timeline on my wall that I'd printed off on 20 sheets of paper across my entire dining room wall. And then I expanded on those. So I put what do I want to happen in this episode? So, it ended up being pretty cool and really useful, and I left it on my wall for a while. Right now on my wall I have a bunch of sticky notes with brainstorming stuff for a new story called Blood Heir, which is H-E-I-R, one who inherits, not heir, like A-I-R, which would be, I guess...
They inherit heir.
Yeah, it would be that'd be a weird story, just Blood Heir. Anyway, so I will be outlining that one in a similar way, and I do think that I'm going to create a serial fiction version of this story that I'm going to be working on. But I have a very specific way I organize my serial fiction outlining process, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but I did want to talk about how I use Scrivener and Aeon together.
Evil.
Oh, because you don't like Scrivener? Yeah.
I hate Scrivener. Also, another thing for those people, Kit uses all the things that I consider evil for writing, but
Yes.
Outlines, Scrivener.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I do really love Scrivener. I love that it tells me how much I've written, how much I need to write. It gives me data about how many words I've written on average and how long it took me to write them. I love that I can keep everything. Cool. It's basically a story Bible as well. I can keep everything in one place, and it's one file. So it's not I'm not going to get into that. We did a software episode, so if you want to listen to me rant about how great Scrivener is, just go listen to our software episode. But the way that I use Aeon Timeline in Scrivener is that I will start off in Scrivener trying to figure out how long I want the overall story to be, so how many words or how much time I want it to be in world. And then I divide that up with, a basic outline technique. One that I've kind of put together for my season structure. outline is the first 3 episodes should be... It's really hard to describe. I will include a visual on our website and probably on our Instagram so that you can see what I'm talking about. But basically, each episode is going to be between 2,000 and 2,500 words. So overall, it's going to be about 5,000 words, which means you'll have around 25-ish episodes, 20 to 25 episodes. The first 3 episodes for me are going to be the character is in a zone of comfort, which is from the Dan Harmon story circle. It is the lure or the hook if you're writing for screen, and it's the inciting incident if you're looking at classic outlining plot structure. The second 3 episodes, from 4 to 6, are going to be the character wants something and the first plot point. 7 through 9 will be they are entering an unfamiliar situation and it's the first pinch point. 10 to 12 is going to be they adapt to that unfamiliar situation, which gets you to the midpoint. 13 through 15, they get what they wanted. It's the big twist. You up the stakes. It's the second pinch point. 16 through 18, they pay a heavy price for that change, and it's the third pinch point. 19 through 21, they return to their familiar situation. It's about the season finale era, and it's the climax of the climax of the season. And then the last few episodes, 22 to 24, are they have changed. It's this final bit of the season finale, and it's the resolution of the classic plot structure. Again, I will include a visual for this. It's just kind of like an amalgamation of Dan Harmon story circle with a basic TV season structure and plot structure from writing books. And it's really, really useful for writing serial fiction because it gives you exactly what you need per set of episodes. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to need that.
Yeah, for sure. I can give it to you.
Which is
I divided
awesome.
up the first episode of my Arborist of Asgard, and I can give you the examples for Dan Harmon Story Circle. So step 1 is, I'll just read the whole thing all together, and then I'll tell you how my episode played out. So a character is in a zone of comfort, but they want something. They enter an unfamiliar situation, adapt to it, get what they wanted, pay a heavy price for it, then return to their familiar situation, having changed. So that's like the basic story circle.
It sounds pretty much like the hero's journey.
Yes, it is very much like that. It's much more basic, and it's, I think Dan Harmon, what TV show did he write? Is it Rick and Morty?
Maybe.
I think it's...
I don't know. I haven't watched that either.
Yeah, I just started watching Rick and Morty a few months ago, and I ended up stopping. I think it was on Hulu or something, and I was tired of ads. But I think he wrote Rick and Morty, if I'm not mistaken. I could be totally mistaken. Look it up for yourselves. But his episode structure is that, and also his season structure is that. So it's super basic. It can be used for any size story, basically.
Cool.
And my first episode of The Arborist of Asgard follows that. It starts off with Scotty and her dad lived their life. Her dad dies, and she needs help. That's something she wants is help. She enters an unfamiliar situation by going to the mayor, who's Odin, and asking for help. She's trying to blackmail him. She adapts to it by being very tough and getting through that. She gets what she wanted, and that's help, which is in the form of Njordur, who is not going to be helpful. She doesn't know it yet. She pays a heavy price for it, and that price is that he sucks and that he doesn't know anything about her job. And he has kids, which is a total surprise to her. So, and then she returns to her familiar situation, which she goes home at the end of the episode, and she has changed. Now she has the help that she thought she wanted. That came at the heavy price, and we're going to have to see what happens next. So my episode basically follows that structure. And you can do that for every episode you do. You can leave off in a certain spot on a certain part of the cycle and give yourself a cliffhanger or give your audience a cliffhanger. Or you can complete the whole thing and it'll still be interesting and propel forward because it's a wheel. So it's rolling, you know what I mean? So once it's rolling, it'll be easier to keep writing.
Nice.
Yes. So what I do after I've created that in Scrivener is I go to Aeon Timeline, which is just timeline software, and I put it all into that. So you can create whatever timeline you want. You can put it in real world time, or you can make your own, time, months, way of keeping, days of the week and everything. You can change all that in Aeon Timeline for whatever story you have. So if you have a fantasy world and the months are named after gods or something, you can do that pretty easily in Aeon Timeline. But once you get that all together, then you put it in from Scrivener, your basics. You don't put in everything, but you add your characters that you want. And I'm not going to get into everything Aeon Timeline is good for, but it's super, super awesome for keeping track of where characters are, how their plots are developing, how their character, development is going, and how they interact with each other. So who is in which episode, who is developing per episode. You can see all of that in like charts and stuff on Aeon Timeline. It's really, really good. I did try to use Plottr, and Plottr is really cool, and it has a lot of outlining structures and a lot of templates you can use for characters. And I really like they have like dating profiles for characters, so you can kind of like answer questions based on, what your character likes and dislikes. And I did do that for some of my characters, and it was super helpful in understanding who they were and what they wanted and liked and stuff. But I found out after I did all of that work and got all my characters put in and my basic plot ready to go, that you can only export, and it creates a brand new Scrivener file. You can't sync it with Scrivener, so as you make changes in your Plottr file, it will cross over to Scrivener. So if you create a new character in Plottr, it doesn't matter for Scrivener. You've already created your one single file for Scrivener, and you can create a brand new one with all of the new information, but you can't really take that and dump it into the Scrivener file you already have that exists for that story. So that's kind of a pain in the butt, and I'm sure that there are workarounds like copying certain specific documents from the newly created Plottr Scrivener file and dumping them into your older Scrivener file, but that's like an extra layer of work that I just am not interested in, and I'm not even sure how well it would work. So anyway, I tried using it, but for me it doesn't work if it doesn't sync with Scrivener in real time, basically. And Aeon Timeline definitely does. So those are the two that I use. Plus I will also take pictures of all my sticky notes before I take them down and dump those as just like image files in my research bin in Scrivener. So anyway, sorry for talking for 15 minutes about my own outlining techniques, but
hey, I learned something too.
Good. Yeah. I would recommend definitely outlining just the very basics, if you can, of your serial fiction stories. That's the one that I would say definitely just outline the most basic. So one sentence per episode. What do you want this to be? And keep in mind as well, what role does that fill in your overall story? So like, is it the inciting incident? Is it the point at which the hero can no longer turn back? Is it the part where, the hero gets what they want, but they find out that it isn't actually what they wanted after all? Like, whatever your thing is, obviously it doesn't have to be about heroes. You just keep in mind that each episode needs to have a one sentence purpose. So if you do that and then you expand it later on with like side plots and stuff, you're going to have a great story. You're going to have a great season outline, and you don't need to do it all at once as long as you have that very basic one sentence per episode outline to start off with. It'll help you also keep motivated and keep going, because you'll know exactly what's supposed to come in the next episode, and you won't be like, oh, what was I supposed to write for this? You'll already know. You have the one sentence. So anyway, I'm going to stop here.
Cool.
Cate, why don't you tell us about your non-outlining stuff?
Okay.
So cavalier.
So a lot of the things that I do are in my head. So I guess if I get a story idea, and as I've mentioned before, if I'm typing, then it is a serious idea that I would actually like to turn into a book. If I'm handwriting, that all depends on what style I'm handwriting it in. And what instrument I'm using to handwrite it. So if I'm typing, usually it's because a character has come into to sound crazy. I have this office in my head. It is this cute little office inside of the inner city. There is a fire escape by a window that a bunch of pigeons like to chill at. I don't know why. It's just how it visualizes in my head. There is a big green couch. There is a chair. There is a filing cabinet. And occasionally I will get a character who walks into this office and sits on the couch. And in this filing cabinet in my head will start their story. So I will create a new file that goes into that cabinet that is for this character. And either they will sit there and be absolutely quiet, and I have to like question them like a therapist would, or they just start talking. And that talking starts equaling in my head the story. So, sounds a little crazy, but whatever. And for me, that starts things. And for my pantsing abilities, I can usually see the climax of a story. So if I was to write an outline, I would know this is the main point of the story that I want to get to. And from there, I would fill it in backwards. So I never actually fill in what is the actual ending of the book, because that can always shift. And endings should shift from the original, unless the original is really good. But usually the first idea you have is not always the best idea. So I leave the ending blank. Example, Scandal's pen. I wanted her to pretty much tell off her dad and like take over the factory and have Theo by her side. They were just supposed to be like, yes, that is not the ending that is now in my book. Like, I have fire, murders, like you name it. That ending shifted.
Endings,
yes. So that shifted. But for me, if I'm writing an outline, which is very rare that I actually write one out, I start with this is the climax, and then I'll go to the beginning of, well, how long does it take to get to that point? And a lot of it does deal with getting to know my characters better. I'm very good at sitting, talking to them in my head, and then feeling like I'm experiencing their life. And then I am a method writer, which we've talked about, I think we've talked about.
Why don't you give us a little quick summary of what you mean by that?
Sure. So method writer is like a method actor. You would start doing the things that your characters would do. So I will dress up in Victorian clothing, so I know what it's like to sprint down a road in big skirts and a corset. I did an entire choreographed fight scene with the clothing correctly on, so like I know how it moves, stuff like that. So I'm a method writer. So that helps me write their characters better. I feel like I'm becoming them and can tell their story. So that's how I would outline. The other thing that I guess I do, because I am a co-writer with my other podcast host, and you can watch us outline the entire book on our Patreon. So we are outlining it. And it was really interesting because he's like, yeah, just pants it. And I was like, no. We need to outline because we're co-writing this.
Right.
So I fought for an outline, which was super weird because I'm writing the first draft of it, and then he goes in and adds his voice and corrects sections or adds to it. And so he was just like, yeah, pants it, go ahead. And I was like, no. Don't give me permission to pants this. I was like, we're going to need to know some stuff. So we'll outline, which is just me putting down a bunch of notes and us talking and recording what we say. And I think we got 5 chapters, or because we're doing it as a Kindle Vella, we got 5 episodes. And he goes, cool. Within those 5 episodes, as long as we get to that point, we're good. And then we're going to outline after that, fixing or not fixing, but fixing the original written outline, which is, by the way, like 20 sentences, if that, for this outline. And from there, we'll fix things and create the next section. So we're not doing a full-blown outline. We have the climax. We've already written the climax, or well, we've written right before the climax. So we know where we want to go with it. Other than that, it's slightly pantsing and slightly outlining. It's a vague outline, so I don't have to follow it. But yeah, that's my outlining process. When I like word vomit at people, I can outline on a piece of paper, because sometimes I like to actually write down or show, and it becomes a really weird. One of these days I'll actually take a photo of one of them for my space opera, and I describe 9 books on one piece of paper, and it's crazy looking, but it's pretty much mind mapping, and that is something I actually enjoy, and we'll be doing an episode on mind mapping, so I'm not going to get into it in this one. But yeah, that's pretty much what I do for outlining. I will build my world. I will create my characters. The character sheets aren't completely filled in because as I write, I will be introduced to more things, or they will tell me more things about themselves. So yeah, that filing cabinet in my head holds a lot of stuff. So it will hold the characters, it'll hold the world, it'll hold the plot. I mean, sometimes my characters in my book are doing things that I don't think about, and then when I read back through, I'm like, wow, they did this. Mm-hmm. That was pretty cool. Like, I had 2 characters fall in love behind my back, and by the time I realized it, I was like, yo, you fell in love even though I didn't want you to. Like, ah, man.
The audacity.
So, yeah. I know. It was so annoying. I was like, dude, now I have to actually write this in. So yeah, so for me, outlining is very, I don't want to say wishy-washy, but it's much more lenient whenever I do it. And it's never a full-blown start-to-finish outline, because I'll never actually listen to that. Or if I outline all the way, I get really bored with the story and I'll never go back to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my outlining. It's not really outlining, but that's because I'm a pantser.
I know we're going to talk about this in the characters craft episode, but I really liked what you had mentioned earlier about making your characters and like having an idea also with your plot of where you want it to end, and then kind of just seeing what journey it takes to get to that ending. I've just recently started this way of developing my characters where I figure out where I want them to end in terms of like personal development. Like, how do I see them at the end? What kind of person are they? And then I look at how I start them off, and I try to match up qualities that are the same and qualities that have changed for the better, usually for the better, obviously, but sometimes not. And then I map a path very vaguely of how they might get from one to the other, and I keep in mind as I'm writing that this character needs to go from A to B, and so that's something that I noticed. And then also I really like your method writing thing, and I didn't realize that I also do this, but I have a hard time figuring out how to write stuff like, okay, for example, when I'm not hungry, I can't possibly understand how anybody else could be hungry. It's like super weird. Like I'm very empathetic, and I don't understand how it can be so black and white sometimes, where I'm like absolutely not empathetic. I have no sympathy or empathy for anybody else who's in a different state than me sometimes. But like if I'm not hungry and somebody eats around me, I'm like sick to my stomach, like disgusted. And I'm like, how could they possibly be eating at a time like this? Like when I'm not even hungry, you know, I mean, I know I'm not really putting it in there as like a selfish thing. I want people to eat. Of course, my children should definitely eat whether or not I feel nauseous. I never tell them this. I don't want anybody to feel weird eating around me. But, when I'm not in a specific state of mind or being, it sometimes can be difficult for me to think about being in that. So like I can say how it feels to be hungry because I've been hungry, you know what I mean? But I don't necessarily remember every visceral detail. So something I do now is when I'm hungry or when I'm sick or when I am frustrated or having some other state of being that's different from my baseline, I try to write down the feelings in my body that I have for during that. And then I can apply that to my writing later. And that's really helpful. I just wrote a scene in my Arbust of Asgard where she's sick. And I literally wrote it while I was like, I had like the flu or something a couple months ago. And I wrote it during that time when I had the flu. And I feel like reading back now, I can see, I'm like, oh yeah, like, ugh, that sucked. Like everything's, like your eye is hurt, your eyes feel hot. Like, yeah, so I like really wrote specific things down and it helped my writing later. So if you, I know that's not exactly outlining, but if you do have difficulty with sometimes remembering how it feels to be in a different state of being, when you are in that state of being, take note. So that's a random tip for you.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty cool idea too. Yeah. It's definitely part of that method acting or method writing.
Yeah. Do you have anything else?
Nope. Oh, wait. Yes, I do.
Okay.
Okay. There is a very interesting thing that I do. And I will outline with music. And so I create playlists. And the music itself will have a peak. So, like, each song will build up to this, like, is the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
And then we'll settle down. So I have, if I know I'm writing a love scene, I have music that will build all of that tension all the way up. And then, like, maybe 3 songs of, like, that, yeah, moment. And then the slow after. If I'm having a fight scene, I have the music building in intensity until that, like, the pinnacle of the fight. So I guess I'll outline my music that way. And then when I'm writing those scenes, I'll play that music so it's more in the mood.
Nice.
So yeah. So I guess that's a thing I outline pretty strictly.
Yeah.
So yeah. So there, that's it. That's all I do with my outline.
Well, that is interesting. I don't think I'd be able to stick with music like that. I tend to be all over the place with it and just listen. Usually I'll listen to one song on loop while I'm writing. Yeah. And I can't listen to anything else. And it has to be a specific song, and I have to search to find that one song that fits that time. And it doesn't even have to fit the mood of what I'm writing. It just needs to not distract me.
Oh, see, and I'll listen to music that has words while I write. I'm one of those. Like, I can do that. I don't know how people don't always, like, or can't. Sometimes, like, those songs set those moods, man. But yeah.
Yeah, I can listen to music with words, but it has to be, like I said, on loop or something that I can stop paying attention to. But yeah, I admire your ability to drown out the the words of the song, but still be inspired by them.
Oh yeah, I don't know. It becomes one of those where it's just background.
Yeah,
you don't really actually or I don't actually focus on it, and occasionally I will, as I call it, surface. Especially if suddenly, like, I'm done with that scene, but the music is still going. Yeah. Because, like, I make long playlists, because, you know, writing can sometimes take a while. And if that music is still not, like, the correct scene, it'll surface me. Mm-hmm. And then I have to, like, go switch my music.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you switch while you're writing? If you've gotten past the point of one thing and the music is still going, do you switch to the next song?
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, I have playlists even for characters. So, like, this is the songs for when I'm writing this person's, like, scene.
Nice.
So, a lot of YouTube playlists.
Yeah, it sounds like.
Other than that, I don't really outline.
All right. Well, I think that we'll wrap it up then, and we'll end here. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening. We appreciate your time and your ears or eyes or whatever you're using to give us your attention. And you can like, subscribe, do the social stuff. Links below. Have a great week, and see you next time.
Bye.